Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Zoe, and I'm the Lived Experience Project Lead at Finding North Network. Welcome to our session today. Today's session is Finding My North, and it's a conversation about showing up with our guest today, Paul Granger. Before I do that today, I'd like to first, in the spirit of reconciliation, Finding North Network acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to the land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islands people today. This morning, I am connecting with you all on the lands of Turrbal and Yagara people, and I encourage you to add the lands that you are on in the chat. On top of that, I'd like to acknowledge the value of the expertise of the people with families and carers with living experiences of mental health conditions. And I'd like to recognise and amplify marginalised voices to build a more inclusive future for everyone. So thank you so much for being here today, everyone. And I'd just like to let you guys know that, today our series Finding My North is based on the Finding North network that we've created. And this is an exclusive network for lived experience members who identifies with having a lived experience of mental health conditions. And this is a place where, we all like to connect, learn from like-minded people as well, and really to talk about, the topics that sometimes can be uncomfortable, and we really need a safe space to, share with people and chat about. So now, in terms of virtual etiquette, please stay on mute and your video off, as this sessions will be recorded. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, drop it in the chat, and I can talk to Paul and ask him at the end, or feel free to turn on your video at the end, because we will be stopping the recording when we're up to the question and answer time as well. If you at any time feel that you need to take a break, please walk away from the sessions. Please message me if you need anything. Crystal and I are here to support you. As just because that, some of the content and some of the topics that we might talk about sometimes can trigger, some uncomfortable emotions and bring up, memories. So it's really important that you look after yourself, and we are here to help if you do need anything. So please feel free to private chat us at any time. So today, I'm so excited for this session. I've known Paul for a little while now, and I want to introduce you to Paul Granger. So Paul really is someone that's really passionate about people, and he's got so much love and passion about mental health. He describes himself as a round peg, and I love that about him. Is like, why do you want to fit in? And he's currently working. He just started his new job at UTS as a community coordinator, and he has a background in career coaching at Torrens University as well. But really, what really hits me with him is that he is also a Beyond Blue ambassador, and he's joined the Red Cross Youth Activist Initiative, and he is amazingly passionate and always want to give back to the community, and he is really passionate about mental health, and this is why we're talking and chatting today about showing up. So I guess, Paul, here you go. Welcome today, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Zoe. I appreciate the invitation to come on. It's super cool what you guys have put together as far as building this community of like minds, building a safe space for people to come to share and to connect with one another. And really grateful for the opportunity to kind of be a part of that community and contribute here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I think, these, our conversations are, outside of these type of chats, Paul and I catch up regularly, to have these conversations about mental health and share our book nerd, our inner book nerd about what books to read. But I guess the topic today is really about showing up. And I wanted to, first of all, share with you that I'm not sure if I told you this, but the reason that I'm in a lived experience role is because of you. And because you showed up. Well, long story short, guys, like the story is me, I was a coach for Paul for a little while, and we actually shared our stories together where we worked together. But when I shared my story, I had actually hidden anything of my mental health conditions. I was not, I don't think I'd ever even thought that I could do that. And then Paul was a speaker after me, and he shared his story about his mental health. And that was the first time that I thought, well, I mean, my first reaction was, oh my God, what did you just do to yourself? That shock, of someone actually sharing that so openly, it took me quite a while to get over, because I was like, wow, that's like suicide, honestly. I think it's to your own career, especially in the space that we're in. But after a while, I felt so empowered by it that Paul became kind of my inspiration, and that's how eventually I actually came into this role today. So I just want to thank you, Paul, for showing up when I didn't expect it, when I didn't ask for it, and for being so brave and courageous.
Wow, thanks, Zoe. Yeah. And I think that's, I'm kind of blown away by that, to be honest. But I think that's what I've learned. That's why I show up, is hopefully it's, whether it's a group of, half a dozen people, or whether it's a room full of 200 people, no matter how scary that is, because I remember speaking at the Torrens University Summit, and there was 250 or whatever people there, and all the top dogs in the university, and I'm there sharing my story again with mental health and my journey through that. And before going up on stage, I'm running to the toilet, and I'm like ready to throw up, and I'm like, I was up until 3 o'clock in the morning the previous night trying to prepare and remember what I wanted to share, and to structure it in the right way. And I was freaking out. But then it's always a case of, you're sharing not for the room full of 250 people, you're sharing there for the one person, maybe in the back row, the front row, wherever they are, who really needs to hear that. And maybe it doesn't, sink in straight away, but they leave, and things start to marinate as they did for you. And then that's kind of where the impact really starts to manifest. And I'm inspired just hearing that story, and the impact that it had on you, Zoe, because that's kind of why I've tried to show up for these events. And it's for that one person in the room who, you've got an opportunity to plant the seed and then kind of let that grow in its own time. It's, I think if there's something that I've learned, it's you don't need to change everything in the world yourself. Sometimes it's just about planting seeds and then allowing, all of these seeds to go out and grow and change the world. So, and that's exactly what you're doing now with the work you're doing, which is, super inspiring to me to have played a little role in facilitating that.
Thank you. What I really want to ask you is, you shared a little bit about your mental health journey. I'd like you to share a little bit as well. But my question after that is, how did you decide to use that as an inspiration? I mean, you were the first person to me to show me that I can do it. And, being brave and vulnerable, like what happened on your end? What's your story?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'd probably go back to the time when I was a teenager, and just normal teenage life is stressful and whatever at the best of times, and had the normal teenage things going on. You're trying to get through school. I'm getting myself into trouble, trying to pass all my assignments, and then you come into the later years of adolescence, and I'm getting acne, and then it's all the social issues and not wanting to go to school because you can't look at yourself in the mirror, and all of these kind of self-esteem issues. And there was kind of that aspect of it initially, but then I guess on top of the normal challenges of being a teenager, then there was, certainly a lot of struggles with my dad's mental health. That kind of played a big role, I think, for all of my life up until that point, but certainly I was more aware of it towards the end as to, exactly what he was facing with depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. And then that had quite an impact on the relationship between he and mum. So it was actually in, I think it must have been year 11. So just as I was coming into my final year of school, when dad had an episode of, he was triggered and his PTSD was really bad. And then one day he, just couldn't handle being around home anymore. And then he just yeah, something set him off, and then he just left suddenly. And yeah, then it was pretty much, I'm the youngest child in my family, so my older brother and sister, they'd moved out, so then it's just me and mum at home with the family home, the mortgage, and that just created this environment that was really, quite high pressure on me. It's like I'm just trying to get through, being a teenager and get through life, and then suddenly it's, being told every 5 seconds to turn the lights off, to watch how much water you're using, because it's, suddenly it's mum and me just trying to like keep everything afloat at that point. And I think there were points in that process where I was certainly ready to drop out of school in year 11. You start getting yourself into trouble, you start getting suspended, and there's other reasons for that, which we won't go into, but it was very, very near to the point where I wasn't going to finish year 11. And luckily at that point I had some really good mentorship from a teacher who kind of planted a seed in me to maybe persevere for a little bit longer and at least attempt year 12. Like, kind of like, you made it this far, just like start and see how you go. And then I guess over that summer break, I really took the opportunity to reset and came into my final year of school like, okay, let's just get involved in everything. Let's give this a go and let's just make the most of this final year. And that's what I tried to do, I guess, initially. Like things I never would have thought I would have done. It's like, it was called House of Knowledge, and it was like a massive school trivia competition in front of the whole school. And like, we won that somehow. I was in the school musical, which I never would have thought I would have been singing and dancing on stage in front of 500 people, being the, shy introvert. But that was probably the best experience that I ever had at school. So I was doing all these things I never would have thought I would have done. But then I think looking back, I was probably just trying to distract myself from what was actually going on. Because whilst I was getting involved in all of these cool things that I'd never done before, I also wasn't submitting my assignments. And then I remember coming back after the term 1 break, and it just hit me that it was like, wow, you are so far behind. You haven't submitted anything. You're still trying to deal with all of the stress at home. And then that's kind of where everything started to come undone. And it was just like, I was trying to maybe distract myself. And then within a matter of months, it was like, I wasn't going to school for weeks. I couldn't get out of bed. Just really couldn't face. And it now felt like I was so far behind, and it was impossible to catch up on what I'd been avoiding. I think it was probably like 2 or 3 months later, and just a few months from finishing year 12, where I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm not in a good place. It's just too overwhelming to even think about. And that's when, much to the upset of mum, it was like, I can't finish. Like, I just need to step back from this. Would have been 3 or 4 months from finishing year 12. I kind of dropped out, and then began this, probably this period that was going to shape me as far as like really diving into the dark depths of who I am and understanding myself and understanding where I want to go. And there was probably a period, at least one period of 6 months, where I just didn't leave the house. Couldn't look at myself in the mirror. Like, even having a shower, I could leave the extraction fan off so the mirror fogged up. So, when I got out, I literally couldn't look at myself, and little things like that, where I was just so paralyzed by, all of the anxiety, the depression that was getting worse and worse, the fear of leaving the house, the isolation, not having a support network around me, not having a community to kind of lean on at that point. And then that kind of lingered around, and there were seeds of inspiration where I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and turn my life around here. And then you try and take on everything in the world to turn it around. And then you realize that's impossible, and then you kind of lose hope really quickly. So I tried a few times, but I think that period ended up being about 18 months where I was just a little bit lost and hopeless and trying things and being discouraged. until the day finally came when it was, and I remember this very clearly. It's probably about, 3 a.m. And I remember just laying in bed, like hadn't slept all night. And that was the first moment when I was like, well, it's kind of all a bit pointless at this point, like, and then that was the first moments where I started to think about, like, how can I end this? How can I escape this? Like, I feel like I've tried. I feel like I've made an effort. I feel like I've done everything I can, and I'm still laying in bed alone, like with no direction. Mum's telling me to finish school and go to university, but that doesn't seem achievable. Or does it seem like something I want to do? So I guess the only other option is just to bail out. And that's when I started thinking about ending my own life. And then something like really, I can't quite, like, whether we go into like a spiritual, philosophical, whatever, but it was like there was something that came over me in that first moment of like suicidal ideation, where it kind of hit me that if I could just persevere for long enough, there was something about what I was going through that was going to have a tremendous power for other people, and that I felt like there was going to be opportunities where I was going to be able to share some of those experiences to help and inspire other people. And like, that was a crazy night, but like, it was the only way that I could rationalize what I'd experienced, was to find a way to use this to help other people. That was the only way it made sense. So I would have been 17 at that point, 17 or 18. And then, I think at like 5 o'clock in the morning, I started recording a video on Mum's laptop webcam, kind of saying, hey, this is how I've been feeling. This is what I'm going to do. Like, join the journey with me. I don't know if I've shared that video with you, Zoe, but I'm curious to share that with you in the community afterwards. But very raw, and it was just like, okay, this is the starting point. This is the mission that I'm on now. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. But the how isn't as important as the why. And ever since then, it's not the last time that I've had those kinds of thoughts again. But I've persevered with the hope that, one person on this journey, or now that I know you've been impacted, Zoe, maybe 2 people on this journey can really be inspired to persevere and to continue being a positive inspiration to the people in their lives.
I think that's really beautiful. I don't know, like I'd say I had similar experiences as you. I dropped out of high school as well. I just want to say it's not the only option, even though you felt at it, because I, as someone who was on the same road, actually did do something different. I was someone who actually did take the road and did attempt, to end my life. So I think there's something innately beautiful and courageous, about you that, gives you that road. And that was the only path that you saw at that time. And I think it's really important to just take a step back and just think about how powerful this is. And, I guess, I wanted to ask you as well, is how do you stay so vulnerable? You shared that, you have those puking moments or super scared before sharing an experience, but I found that you've always shared your story so generously with everybody. I wanted to ask, how do you do that?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like, I just don't know any other way. But maybe that's it. Maybe might need to think about that for a moment.
That's all good.
Like, I just think back to that moment, and I think it's like I've been to digress a moment just while I think about that question.
All good.
It's like I've been thinking a lot about life as being a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, and we're journeying through life and we're finding the different pieces, and sometimes we can get stuck on the one piece, and we can spend hours or days or weeks, years trying to understand what that one piece means, but it's impossible. It's just a shade of blue or a shade of orange, and it doesn't mean anything. But it's only through kind of persevering and finding the pieces around that that we begin to assemble the picture of what it actually is. And sometimes, I think that's what sharing my story is. It's just sharing little pieces of that jigsaw puzzle. And I don't know what I'm sharing half the time. It's from the heart. Like today, it's kind of like I would love to have prepared a more articulate version of my story, but sometimes that's not the point. Today's piece of the puzzle is to show up and to just express openly in a safe space that you guys have created here. And through that, maybe other people will kind of find their piece of their puzzle and kind of make the picture clearer for them. So I think, I feel like that's always been on my heart to do, is just to find ways to share, whether it's a little LinkedIn post, or whether it's speaking at an event like this, or writing a blog, or coaching with students at the university. I just feel like there is such tremendous power in storytelling, and we all tell our stories in different ways. We all, feel comfortable in sharing in different ways and sharing different parts of our story. But I think when we just find little ways to connect our journey with other people, it's gonna resonate to different people in different ways. And it's not putting pressure on ourselves to go out there and change lives. It's just, as we said earlier, it's just planting seeds. It's just helping that one person find one extra piece in their jigsaw puzzle, and that's all it is. And in doing that, if we can all do that in different ways, and just find just a little piece of courage to have one conversation with one person in one safe space, that's all it is. I'm not any different to anyone else doing that. I've maybe just found different audiences to share that with, maybe larger audiences. But the motivation is just the same. And I think we've all got power to do that in our own friendship circles, our own relationships, and to give generously in the spaces where we feel comfortable. So maybe in a long roundabout way, I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's really important for us as human beings to know that we can give back, and our way of showing up is very different from everyone. I think it's amazing that in the midst of doing everything, for those who don't know, Paul's in the transitioning into a new role and everything. It's a bit chaotic at the moment, but he pushed through and he's still committed to doing this today. And I really wanted to thank him today. And, and the topic that we continuously came back to was showing up. How do we, even though sometimes we go through, hardships and things like that, how can we continuously show up for everybody, and how do we support everybody? So I just really want to thank you, Paul. You are going through a lot, and in the midst of, everything that's going on in the last couple of years, it's just so powerful to have someone like you that's continuously so courageous, and to show up all the time. I'm a scaredy cat, and I'm always in awe by your bravery and your courage that you've shown me, and I live by that every day. So I want you to know that you might think that you've made a small impact in my life, but you were a couple of pieces of puzzle pieces in my life.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to go back to one point there. It's there will be times like showing up every time. There's still times where I don't show up, but I think a book that you and I both read, Atomic Habits, it's like if you're committing to a habit, or you're committing to this practice of showing up, and maybe there's a time where you eat that bar of chocolate when you said you weren't going to eat chocolate, or you don't show up to that event when you really should have been at that event. It's just making sure that you don't do it twice in a row. So there'll be times where I'm having an off day, and it's just, it doesn't feel right for me to be there, or I'm not feeling courageous that day. And that's okay too.
Absolutely.
It's giving yourself an opportunity after that to show up again, or to get back on track, and not allowing that one instance become 2 and 5 and 10 and kind of off the wagon again. So yeah, there's certainly times where I'm not feeling courageous and not feeling like I am the best version of myself. And I, as you know, Zoe, like I set a very high bar for myself. And that's probably why I'm struggling a little bit to settle into my new job, because there's so much I want to do and there's so much opportunity. And it's like, at the end of the first week, I'll know what I'm meant to be doing. At the end of the second week, I will have started things. At the end of the first month, the whole world's going to be different. But it's kind of showing up every day and focusing on the small wins. It's like, if you just walk in the door, if you just set a very, very simple intention for each day, or, you know, like my intention coming into this session is, if I can do nothing else but just turn up, and for that to be the example that I set in this session, then that's a win. And if there's anything else that I share today that resonates with people, then that's a bonus. So it's being kind and kind of bouncing back, because we all have days where it's just not gelling, and that's okay. Tomorrow's a new day. Next week's a new week, and focusing on opportunities to rebound and keep making the impact that we want to make, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many times I've felt that I don't want to show up, and there are some days where I don't show up, and it's really nice to hear, because as a recovery perfectionist, we put a lot of high standards on ourselves as well. And when you said that your first week you're supposed to do that, your second week supposed to do that, you just remind me so much of how I normally feel when I go into a new role. And I think the best one of my coaches said to me, if you feel imposter syndrome in your first month of your new job, it means you're at the right place, at least for the time being, because it means you need to learn, and it's challenging. But it can still be quite difficult, isn't it? To go through that, because I think you and I both want to be we are high achievers, and we just want to do well and hit the ground running everywhere we go.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think it's also being able to take a step back and acknowledge just how far you've come. Like, even there's days now where I maybe don't feel like showing up, and I think, it's the same old story, like whatever. But then if I go back to a time when I was 20 years old, living in England, trying to start a business, I'd taken on, Mount Everest, and I'm like I'm not prepared for this expedition. And there were times where I literally, I'll just avoid everything. If something was too scary, and I remember one example where I was invited to a meeting that probably could have changed my life. There was scope for them to invest, and it would have, transformed the project that I was working on at the time. And I remember just locking the door, pulling the blanket over my face, and just sleeping until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Ignoring phone calls, ignoring messages, ignoring emails. So when I look back at that point in my life, I was avoiding everything. Like, any scary challenge I wasn't showing up for. So sure, there's times now where I don't show up for something that maybe I should have. But when I look at the progress from back then to now, I'm like, wow, okay. 9 out of 10 things now I'm showing up for, and more than 9 out of 10 things, 99 things out of 100, I'm showing up, and I'm actually doing a pretty good job, something that I can be proud of. So I can take heart in that, to know that I don't need to beat myself up in the same way when I am not perfect, or when I don't show up as the best version of myself that one time out of 100. So, okay, it's just, take some time out to step back and actually observe just how much you've grown and how far you've come since, maybe a time when we weren't kicking goals as we are today.
That's beautiful. I really want to talk to you about mental health, especially for men. It's very rare for me, especially, to actually talk to men about mental health. Being Chinese, this is not something that we talk about, and we know the statistics that 1 in 5 Australian men will experience anxiety conditions in their lifetime. And men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women. And I really just want to talk to you about that, because I think I would like to learn to support men and those amazing men around me as much as they support me. And I want to know how we can, or how anyone can support and be an ally.
That's a great question.
From your perspective.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's a really important question. I think it's probably approaching it. Like, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about that is doing it in kind of doing it in a space that's comfortable for us. Like,
what kind of space is that?
Like, if I'm sitting in a cafe, like, catching up with a friend and just kind of talking openly, and that's a safe space for me. If I'm at the beach and, like, in a positive frame of mind, and we're kind of just reflecting on life, how's life going, I feel like opening up, and it's not kind of like when I'm in if someone came into my bedroom and sat down on the floor next to me and started talking to me about this stuff, I'm going to have my wall up as a man. Like, don't come into my space and, want to talk to me about these things. But, like, if I'm at the beach, if I'm at the gym, if I'm, like, kicking the footy with my mates, if I'm, going for a walk, if I'm, having coffee after yoga, these are spaces where it's kind of like, there's a slight lifting of the weight on my shoulders if there's something going on, where I'm more likely to open up. So I think it's kind of finding spaces where guys are probably, feeling more themselves, where you might be able to dig a little bit deeper beyond the surface without instantly getting their wall up. And I think that's what, I've experienced in the past is, people try and they know something might not be right for me. But they'll approach me in a space where I'm just like, look, I just need to be on my own. Like, don't come near me. And that probably has a, opposite effect that's intended. Whereas even just like an invitation to, go and kick the footy, or like, let's book into yoga next week and grab a coffee. I'm like, oh, cool.
I can't do footy, but I'll do yoga.
Do yoga, yeah. And yeah, it's finding something that, creates an environment where, I might be more willing to open up. And I think that's something that, speaking from personal experience, and speaking about environments where I have shared openly with friends, it's these spaces where I feel safe and feel like I can just, be myself. So that's probably the first thing I'll say. I'm not sure if that's helpful.
It is, because I think sometimes I personally, I can only say for myself that sometimes, my male friends, my family and things like that, sometimes I know that something is wrong. And I think as a typical girl, maybe I tend to just go straight into, are you okay? What's wrong? How can I help you? And I get that war often. And then sometimes, when I try to probe a little bit, then I don't really get a good response. And that is something that I want to learn how to go past, because I think, it's not about me trying to help them. I want to support them to get better or get the help that they need, but I don't seem to know how to find the right environment or make them feel like they're not weak. Sometimes I feel like, personally, when I ask about these things, I get that, I guess, response that, men just don't talk about these things, like mental health doesn't exist or emotions don't exist. And I struggle, and I really want to learn how to battle that when they are going through challenging times, and I want to support them. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is going to take a while, but like, I would love to do something where, or to create a culture where it's almost like the stereotypical male, like, you have your wall up, you don't talk about emotions. That becomes really uncool. It's like, for it to be cool for men to talk about these things, but in their own way and in their own space.
Absolutely.
And to kind of create that environment, that's kind of, I guess, what we're all working towards here. But it's still funny, like I go and see a psychologist once a week at the moment, like just working through a few things that came up last year. And that's, we could have a conversation about therapy, but I mean, it's sometimes I just turn up and I'm like, I have no idea why I'm here. Don't know what I'm going to talk about. Don't know what I'm going to get out of this. But again, it's showing up for that, because if there's one thing that I learn over 20 sessions, then that's worthwhile, and anything beyond that is a bonus. But it was interesting about emotions, because I did some work with my psychologist the other day, and she was saying, how are you feeling? I'm like, I just feel foggy. She's like, yeah, but what emotion are you feeling? I'm like, foggy. She's like, well, it's not really an emotion. I'm like, it should be. and then we went through this whole list of like understanding emotions, and she's like, so when you say foggy, which of these actually sounds like what you're feeling? And I was like, well, I feel quite uncertain. And that was what stood out. It's not that I was foggy, I was uncertain about what was next. And that's normal when you're, transitioning through, a different stage of life, or from one thing to the next. I was like, okay. And then we talked through strategies as to, what can we do in this situation to maybe create more certainty now, to then kind of get you to that next step. So I'm still understanding what emotions mean. And I think we're all pretty useless sometimes in being able to articulate our emotions accurately. But I just found that really interesting, because even though I'd say I'm quite emotionally intelligent and aware and okay in expressing emotions, there's still so much for me to learn about myself. And I think, just that funny example of being in therapy and her basically telling me that I knew nothing about emotions, I was like, okay, so there's still room for improvement there. But yeah, and I think if men can, maybe explore that, and maybe, when they're feeling angry, or they find themselves snapping or getting their wall up all of a sudden, it's just like, if we can just create space for long enough just for them to think, what's actually going on for me here, and how might I express that in a different way. And it just starts with that one small shift, the atomic habit, and then we start to build a larger scale change across how men talk about these things.
Yeah. And I think it's particularly hard for men, in my opinion. It's because there's actually studies to show that men, I think, only have a certain amount of, emotional descriptions, like good, bad. Like I think there was 10, like over, and it tells you that even if we are emotionally intelligent, let's just say, our ability to talk about emotions and tell the difference, it's a complete different story. I think I sent you the book before, so we can talk about that another time, about the different types of emotions. But I think, for me, I've been trying to become a better ally by, for example, I'm a little bit more advanced in terms of explaining my emotions, just because my 20 years of therapy and, been really, I love emotional intelligence and things like that. I've done a lot of research. So what I do now in front of my male friends, for example, and even any friend really, is to use different words. And it's just to bring that awareness for them as well. So I think that's how I'm going to continuously, try my best to be an ally. But thank you so much for the tip of creating the right space. I think that's something that I really want to look into in the future. But look, I think we've got about 3 more minutes because I think people want to, everyone wants to chat with you. So I just want to, ask, I guess, a final question is, how do you stay vulnerable all the time? Because I don't have that courage, to be honest, because you just shared with me that you've gone to a psychologist meeting even though you had nothing to talk about or anything like that. And I must say that I've actually avoided these incidents for these types, these scenarios for a while now. I've actually got my appointment finally because I feel like I need a checkup. But in this environment, I think there's just so much angst around the world and everything. How do you look after yourself, but also, stay vulnerable?
Well, yeah, I guess to respond to the vulnerability part first, I think it's really just one. It's like creating that safe space. I've got some like close friends that I can, really open up to. And I think that it's almost like practice sometimes. Like you have those really trusted friends and you feel really safe in those spaces, and you start to hear what you're saying out loud and you're kind of bouncing off each other. So then, when you're talking to someone who's maybe not quite as close a friend, you've kind of had some practices to, talking through how you're feeling and being vulnerable maybe in a slightly different way. And then, I think from that, like I don't really feel any blocks in, sharing what's going on. And I'd also say, just like, touching on the therapy point, maybe it's like just lower the stakes. It's like, this is all of these, whether it's friends or whether it's psychologists, these are all people who are just, here to support us, here to listen, here to help us, here to share the journey. We're all, like, even the psychologist, she's probably seeing a psychologist. I don't know, like, we're all going through our different challenges. And it's not putting, particular pressure on any of these encounters. It's just, hey, this is someone who might be able to open my eyes to something. And even if I don't have a specific goal, like, I'm very, as you know, Zoe, like, very like goal oriented, and I want to get something out of this. But sometimes it's like, I'll just turn up, I'll just show up, I'll just see what happens. If I learn one thing, that's better than, just having stayed at home and, watch YouTube reels or like whatever else I do sometimes. So it's kind of lowering the stakes and just kind of being in the room.
Oh, Paul, I hate you. Now you've given me a new goal to go to therapy without a goal.
Sorry. Yeah. But kind of in a similar way to showing up, it's just like, be in the room. Like, if you don't know if it's going to be the right room for you and you kind of, should I be in that room or not? It's like, just turn up and find out. It's like, and maybe it won't be the right room, but then at least you can cross that one off the list, and then maybe there's, a better room or a better place for you to be next time. But yeah, I kind of just go with the flow now. Like, I'm pretty just like, oh, I'll try that. Oh no, that didn't work. Okay, try something else.
I love that.
And I think that, like, cultivating that bias to action and just trying things, because, we could read, and I have, 100 books on a particular topic, and you get so caught up with, okay, this is the direction I need to go in. But until you actually take action and try what you're reading, you don't know. So we really just need to, like, start with small, low stakes experiments to see what works for us, and taking some of the pressure off ourselves for it to be, this is going to change my life. It's like, well, maybe not, but it might give me an insight that can help me change my life later on.
1% at a time, right? Well, thank you so much, Paul. I'm going to stop recording and give everyone an opportunity to chat with you. Thank you so much.